Hey guys, this is Don Tickner, and today I'll be taking you through a short, informal look at some of the major features of my science fiction roguelike, As You Wake. As You Wake features two modes of play. The primary mode is the story mode. This is set aboard a spaceship where the player must try and survive against hyper-intelligent and adaptive enemies. The second mode is the survival mode. This takes place on a single level where the player faces off against unending waves of ever tougher enemies. The game also features a short tutorial that will teach players how to succeed at either mode. This tutorial is specifically designed for players who have never played a roguelike before. In order to show off most of the major features of As You Wake, I'll be playing the story mode today. As You Wake features basic character customization. At the top here we can see our player character, with the player able to be both male and female, have different skin tones, and a selection of hairstyles. For the purposes of this demo, we'll just select some brown hair, and we'll jump straight into the game. Like all roguelikes, As You Wake takes place in procedurally generated levels. The game is presented using 32-bit color sprites inspired by the PlayStation era, and features real-time 2D lighting to create a horror atmosphere that persists throughout the entire game. One of the features that I've spent a lot of time on is the user interface, trying to make it as user-friendly and accessible as possible. For example, the inventory screen has been divided into 3 areas to provide closely related information to the player to limit the number of screens that they would have to go through. The screen contains the equipment, the player stats, and the player's inventory. For maximum convenience, the inventory is icon-based and drag and drop. This allows the player to naturally and easily arrange their inventory any way that they want. This type of input is familiar to most players and behaves exactly the way that they expect. For example, to equip an item, one simply needs to drag it to its applicable equipment slot. Dragging an item off the screen removes it from the player's inventory, and dragging an item onto the player character uses that item. This type of intuitive user interface goes some way to removing needless complication without dumbing down the game. Presenting information to the player simply and cleanly carries over to the other screens of the game. For example, when installing one of the game's 8 biomods, the player is presented with both abilities and a simple description of what they do. This is presented in such a way that the player knows that they need to make a choice without having to pause the game and explain that choice to the player. The other screens of the game are presented in a similar manner, ensuring that the player has access to all of the information they need. Where possible, convenience has been added, like dragging and dropping of abilities, to add them to a context-sensitive quick slot bar at the bottom of the screen. Another major focus for As You Wake is giving the player different options in different situations. Here the player encounters a locked door, where they can use their mechanical skill to unlock it, or their melee skill to attempt to force it open using their melee weapon. These type of choices offer the player multiple paths to success. We see that the player's mechanical skill has allowed them to access a supply room. Here they will obtain items that will enable them to survive later in the game. The player's chosen skills and biomods provide them different avenues to respond to different situations. Here we see that the player has encountered a group of enemies. Using their chosen shockwave ability, they're able to effectively handle a situation that they wouldn't have been able to survive otherwise. In order to provide deep choice to the player, the game features an interlocking attributes and skills system. Increasing an attribute provides a bonus to its associated skills. For example, increasing the strength attribute increases your melee skill. Each attribute also affects a different aspect of your character. Increasing strength increases the carry weight of your character, while increasing your intelligence increases the amount of bioelectricity you have to power your biomods. In addition to increasing their attributes, a player can also improve their skills. Each skill ties into a different aspect of gameplay. For example, improving your melee skill enables you to fight more effectively with melee weapons, while improving your armor skill increases the benefit that armor provides. The player's biomod, attribute, and skill choices will dictate how they can adapt to a given situation. Here we see that the player has a low amount of health and an enemy nearby. The player has increased their firearm skill, enabling them to defeat this enemy before it gets close enough to do any damage. Equally important to their skill choice is the player's choice of weapon. Each weapon has a different type of damage, and each type of damage is effective or less effective against different types of enemies. This type of information can be gathered by the player by using the dissection mechanic. This involves defeating an enemy and trading a health item such as a health pack for points of knowledge. Each point of knowledge represents a point of bonus damage against this particular type of enemy. After a certain amount of knowledge has been obtained, the player will unlock this enemy's info log, which will break down their behavior and their types of damage. The player can also unlock different harvestable items unique to this enemy. This again provides the player with multiple avenues for success. Intelligent use of the systems of As You Wake is paramount to success, and As You Wake punishes failure to use its systems with permanent death, wherein the player's save file is deleted when the character dies. This creates the necessary tension and fear that form the heart of the game experience. I hope you've enjoyed this first look at As You Wake. There's a lot more to the game, including evolving and adaptive enemies, as well as advanced artificial intelligence. I'll be covering each of these topics with our own videos in the near future. So until then, thanks for watching.